Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Go the Distance podcast, where we have real, raw conversations about real, raw life issues and stories. We've had some amazing weeks in the past few weeks that we've had on our podcast, whether it's been talking to Sarah about marriage or John Finch about fatherhood, or as we visited last week at Deacon Sam, what God's doing in their life and the big faith step and risk that they're taking in their life as God is calling them to greater days and greater things. I wanted to take this evening to just visit with you one-on-one, just me and you and me. And I want to talk to you about a topic and a subject that many of you have been asking me about because so many of you are new to Rock Creek. Now, for some of you that watch this each and every week, but beyond that, you've known me for several years and you've known the story of Rock Creek before it was Rock Creek. You may have heard all of this or you may know all this, but you may want to keep listening and watching to bring yourself up to speed and remind yourself of what God has done for all of us here at this amazing place. But for a lot of you, you don't know this story. And it's a story that really I'm the one that can tell it. Now, many can tell you parts of it, but I'm really the only one besides maybe my wife Sarah that knows it from start to finish. And that is the story of Rock Creek. And in particular, the story of how we ended up on this piece of property out here on Fish Trap Road. So I'm going to start all the way back at the beginning of how all of this started for Sarah and myself and Ryder and Haley. So I was on staff for a church that I actually grew up in. We had been on staff at two other ministries, and God led us back home after being gone for 10 years after college. We'd been gone from this area for 10 years. Most recently, we'd been in Springfield, Missouri, working there at a church, and God led us back home to work at my home church, Midway Church in Aubrey, Texas, where I grew up, where I gave my life to Christ, where I surrendered my life to ministry, where Sarah and I were married. Our wedding was there at Midway Church. So ironically, God brought me home 10 years later, and I got to be the pastor, or the pastors, a staff guy on the church staff at the church that I grew up in. Now that's always a fun thing because there was a lot of people there that remembered me when I was a teenager. So they had some great stories and great reminders they could remind me of. And when I would talk about how great the grace of God was, they were quick to say, yeah, you would know. So it was interesting, but it was a great, great experience to come back to my home church. I was the worship pastor and I was the associate pastor and I was kind of the pastor's right-hand man. We had another guy on our staff that was our student pastor. We had some office staff, some admin, but I was kind of pastor's right hand. He let me preach maybe 3-4 times a year. I got that opportunity, but I helped him run the ministry on the backside and kind of made the machine run and the wheels turn. So just loved doing that. But I also knew when I went there on staff in 2002, Sarah and I knew that it would be the last staff position we would hold before we would step into a senior pastorate role, that would be the last position where we would be the worship pastor or an associate. And so I told Pastor John there at Midway I wouldn't make a lateral move. I wouldn't leave him to go take another staff position. And when I finally did leave him, it would be a senior pastorate. As I began to progress through the years there at Midway, I realized that probably the best thing for me would be not to take a established church, a church that was already started, already had its own DNA, culture, and all of its own structure and its practices and the way they function. I just felt like that I would probably be miserable in doing that, and I probably would make people miserable. So this idea of starting a church began to come to the forefront in my heart and in Sarah's heart. And our best friends, Josh and Ginger Barrett, they were on staff at a church in Springfield, Missouri as well. We served together on church staff previous to the last one they served at before they left there and went to Maricopa, Arizona to start a church from scratch with an organization called Converge. And so as we began to talk about doing that, I called Josh and I asked his opinion and I asked his thoughts and I said, tell me what I need to know. And he's like, well, I can't tell you over the phone. You just need to come out here to Arizona and spend 10 days with me, and you'll know after 10 days if you're to plant a church or not. So I did. I went and spent 10 days with Josh and Ginger in Arizona in the month of July. I don't suggest going to Arizona in the month of July. It's pretty much the surface of the sun. And I don't think it is hell, but it's as close as you can get to hell without being in literal hell. It's hot in July. But I had a great 10 days with Josh and Ginger as they were in the early years of their church plant. And the church plant was called Church of Celebration, COC for short. And so as I was getting ready to leave, to come back home, to tell my pastor at Midway, I felt like God was calling us to plant a church, to start a brand new church somewhere on the 380 corridor between Denton and McKinney. Before I left Arizona, Josh presented me with this idea of planting a church called Church of Celebration, that we would franchise this name, franchise this brand, this logo, and it would make life so much easier on us as all of the pre-work with logos and graphics and bylaws and constitutional work, all that had been done. So, hey, I'm always for the easy way to get all that stuff done, and why reinvent the wheel? And so I felt God leading us to do that. And so that's why in 2007, in the summer of 2007, we started having monthly Bible studies at Rick and Jerry Newton's house on Mockingbird Lane in Paloma Creek North, getting ready to start a church called Church of Celebration Metro. Metro because we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, COC Metro for short. And a little over a year later, in September of 2008, we officially grand opened the church. I left the staff of Midway in October of 2007, and we worked from October of 2007 full-time every single day to get Church of Celebration Metro launched by September of 2008. At that time, we were meeting in the Savannah Elementary School in the Savannah subdivision. We then transitioned to the Paloma Creek Elementary School, just on the north side of 380 on Naval Road. And then we eventually moved across the street to the Naval Middle School. Now, some people call it Navo. I've always known it as Navo. I've grown up in this area, and I can remember when there was a store at the corner of Naval Road and 380, and 380 was 2 lanes, and there was about 10 cars on it every day, and that was the Navo store. And so I've just known that as Naval Road. And Naval Middle School was where we spent the majority of our church's history, growing, reaching people for Christ, seeing people baptized, and just doing the work of everyday ministry. In 2014, end of 13, first of 14, a guy came into my life just ironically through another pastor that had started a church in Prosper. A guy came into my life by the name of Johnny Warren, Johnny and his wife Kathy. And it was an ironic occasion that my friend Sam, who was pastoring a church there in Prosper, Sam Pedigo, where he connected me with Johnny because Johnny had a piece of property on Fish Trap Road, just about 4 miles east of 1385, that he was looking to sell, but looking to sell it to a church. And so Sam knew that, and so Sam knew that we were in a position as a church to begin to need property for future growth and a future facility. So Johnny and I met along with one of our board members, Alan Lewis, for lunch. We went to a real high dollar place. We went to Chili's on El Dorado and the Tollway. And we met there for lunch, and Johnny presented his piece of property, this 30 acres and this beautiful 7,000 square foot house out here on this land. He gave us a package of material about the property, said he wanted $3 million for it, which wasn't a bad price except for the fact that we didn't want the house. We wanted the raw land, we didn't want the house, but Johnny didn't want to stay living here. He wanted to move north and get out of the oncoming traffic that he could see coming because he knew the growth that was headed this way because he worked for the Prosper ISD acquiring land for future school sites. So he had all these big aerial maps here at the house where he could show us all these subdivisions that were coming, and they've all happened, and even more. Windsong Ranch, Star Trail, Sutton Fields, Arrowbrook, all these growth areas up 1385. He had all of these on the map, and even the subdivision across the street from the church's property, the parks at Legacy. And so we began to move into negotiations with Johnny and Kathy about the land. It took about 8 months to really get to a place where we were able to make an offer. And we did. We made an offer, and it was ridiculous. We made this crazy, goofy offer that we knew they wouldn't accept. They countered. We didn't like the counter. We continued conversation. And eventually we got around to the fact that Johnny said, hey, we want to be a blessing to the church. We want to see you guys here on our property. Kathy and I love you, Pat, Brad, and Sarah, and we love what God's doing. They came to COC, checked us out. They've been going to church in Prosper for years, and they came and saw us at the Naval Middle School. They loved our ministry, and they wanted to see our ministry specifically on this piece of property where they had raised their family in this big old house. And so after about 8 months of negotiation, counteroffer after counteroffer, Johnny and Kathy made an offer that we couldn't refuse, and it was this: we'll sell you the land and we'll give you the house. We won't charge you for the house. We'll just sell you the land at $1.70 a square foot, which that's about $70,000 an acre. So we bought the entire 30 acres for $2.23 million, and we bought it in a phased out process. We bought 12 acres from them at first, and then we took down the rest of the acreage about a year and a half later. So about a year and a half after that, we owned the entire piece of property, but we began to work towards a first facility even before we owned the entire piece of property. We began to master plan this land. We began to draw out what the first building might look like, which hopefully someday that building turns into a student center and an office suite, and then we move on and expand on this property. So we had 30 acres. We had the house. We were able to solidify money and lending and raise cash to be able to buy the first 12 acres for a little over $800,000, and then Johnny was going to give us 5 years to pay him off at 5% interest annually, no penalty for early payoff. We paid him 1 year of interest, and then before the next year's interest came due, we paid him off, and we owned the entire property. We were able to solidify financing for the entire piece. And then you guys know, obviously, December 15th, we moved in 2019, we moved into the first facility, the 25,000 square foot, 500 seat auditorium, children's wing, lobby, and everything that you see there, parking lot. And listen, that was an endeavor of itself, but total price tag with the land purchase and with the building, you're right at about $7.2 million that we're setting on. The entire piece of property appraises for over $10 million now. The land already has seen quite a bit of a value increase from $1.70 a square foot to some of it up on the frontage of Fish Trap and Harper, the hard corner, $5 to $6 a square foot. So God has been good to us. He's put us in a very advantageous position. We opened that building December 15th. We're in it 14 weeks. COVID hit us. We were shut down 9 weeks, online only. Been back in since Memorial Day. And I cannot believe we are rolling up on a 1 year anniversary of opening that building this coming mid-December. So all that to say, many of you did not know that story. God has been so good to us. I can't tell you how many times we just didn't think we were going to make it. We just thought, you know what, it's too hard. And there were times we wanted to quit, we wanted to give up. And I'm talking about times back at the school. I'm talking about days when it was cold or days when it was hot. But I want to say something. Our team was amazing. Our setup and teardown team was amazing. I remember when we used to just set up a few chairs and a small sound system and a few children's ministry items in a small hospitality area. And then that grew to more chairs. And that grew to more children's stuff, and it grew to more hospitality stuff, and then it grew to video equipment and bringing in cameras each and every week, and just all kinds of stuff, and band equipment grew and sound equipment grew. And you know, every step of the way our team was up for the endeavor. They were up for it. They weren't saying, oh, let's don't do this. They were like, Pastor, give us more to do. Give us another challenge. Give us another hill to take. And that's why I believe Rock Creek is a great ministry and a great church. Not because of me, because we serve a great God and we have a great team. We have great people here. People that were willing to charge hell with a water gun, thinking they could literally put out the flames. That is how all in they were and how all in they continue to be. Even when COVID hit and we had to figure out online services and streaming online, whether it be pre-recorded or live, and now live every Sunday at 10:30, the team figured it out. So I can just tell you, God has blessed us not just with a great piece of property out here in the epicenter of growth. God has given us not only a blessing of a first building, but God has given us incredibly talented people that know how to get the job done, that know how to do things at a high level of quality. And I'm so proud of them and so blessed to be a part of that team and be honored to be able to lead it. Many of you know there is a middle school just to the west of us. Just a little caveat, side note. When they went to buy that acreage for that school site, obviously Johnny Warren, the man who used to own this land, he was a part of the school purchasing that property over there. Before they could get that property purchased, the city purchased 3 acres where the water tower has been built. And so they needed 3 more acres to have enough room to put that school on that piece of property. So what did Johnny do? Well, Johnny brought the school to us, and they came knocking here at the office and said, hey, we'd like to buy a strip of land from the south to the north, just a straight line, and move the old dirt road over. And hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a brand new road in, a brand new concrete road, and the school's going to pay for the road. We just need you to sell us the land. And so we were able to sell them a 3-acre strip of land, just moving our property line from the west to the east. And if you didn't know that road wasn't always there, you would never know any different. But it's a huge blessing to have a concrete road down to the office now instead of white gravel. We used to never be able to keep a car clean coming down here. But hey, God blessed us. We were able to make revenue off of our land, and we were able to get a road, a brand new road, where we didn't have to absorb any cost. And we already have our curb cuts on the city's drawings on that road when we go to expand out of the current building to the west. So yeah, that is the plan. The plan is to expand to the west, to the hard corner of Fish Trap and Harper, and then back to the north towards the house. At the end of the day, our plan is to sell most of the acreage back here on the north, as well as this big house, to a developer or somebody who would be interested in it. The house serves as our offices, and it will until we're able to secure other offices or sell the property. And so right now, currently, we have 6 acres for sale back here on the north part of the property, and the house included, knowing that at the end of the day, we want 16 acres, and we'll be able to keep 16 acres to build and continue to build on and have our complete church plant property on 16 acres. And so there'll be another building built somewhere in the future. Hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll be building another building with a bigger auditorium, much bigger children with bigger hallways. Come on, somebody. If you're raising kids and you have kids in our children's ministry, you know what I'm talking about there. Bigger lobby, and just able to do more stuff, more adult education space, more meeting space. And so we hope to have that soon. We know we need to expand parking now. So our first expansion, next step would be we're looking at expanding our parking, but we're also looking at potential portable buildings right now to move our elementary age kids out of the children's wing and make that all preschool and put our elementary age into portables until we're able to build the next building. So we know there's an issue. We know there's not enough parking. We know the hallway is too narrow. We know we need more room for kids. Here's what I want you to hear me. We built what we could afford. We built all we could build. And so what's happened is God has brought massive growth, and that's great. And we'll keep doing services and adding services. If we have to do 17 a weekend, we'll do 17 a weekend. You know me, I'm going to be all in to do it. But I know that our greater days are ahead of us, and to help us get there, we got to go all in, all of us. Let's all be all in on it. So I know this, the greatest rewards, the greatest things that we see happen are a result of our great investment into that which matters most, the kingdom of God and the lives of people. So we're not done. We're just getting started. And honestly, if COVID hadn't hit, we'd probably be in 4 services right now staring at a 5th. But that's okay, because we knew that was coming. Hey, listen, we built this building out here on if you build it, they will come. To some degree, that was that risk step of faith that we built it on, knowing we've just got to get out here on this land and let God do what He can do, and only He can do once we get out here. We've done that. We've waited the storm of a pandemic, and now we're seeing God begin to move again in our presence and in our increase in our numbers. And don't think we're not having the discussion. So pray with me. Pray with me. How we can get a couple portables, if not 1, but 2 out here on the property. Pray with me that we'd have the money to expand our parking. Pray with me that we can continue to press forward into our next building. And pray with me that as we have to add and we begin to add more services, that God will give us the energy, God will give us the people to service those services with volunteers. And we've got so many opportunities, and so many of you are new, and I encourage you to take the volunteer class on Sunday mornings at 10:15 and find a place to get plugged in. Hey, let's all just get it done. Let's do something that actually is going to leave a legacy for our kids and grandkids. Let's do something that when people look back on our lives, they say we existed because we made a difference, not just because we were sucking oxygen into our lungs, but we actually made a difference for that which matters most, the kingdom of God. So, I love you. That's the story. That's the history. That's how we ended up on this piece of property. So if you're watching tonight, Brad Pierce, special request, I know that you had made that I talk about the history. So I wanted to do that. Thanks for that encouragement to do that. I know many of you wanted to hear that story, so I wanted to share it with you tonight. That's the history. Did I leave out a lot of details? Absolutely. Did I hit it from a 30,000 foot approach? Absolutely. If you want more details or you want more knowledge on the story, hit me up sometime for a cup of coffee. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee and share more about what God has done, is doing, and is going to do here at Rock Creek. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And we'll see you next week right here on Go the Distance.